Did you know Birmingham, Alabama is the third most dangerous city in the United States, with a violent crime rate that's 388% above the national average, and the 8th highest poverty rate of major cities in the U.S., with 25.5% of their population living below the poverty line? How did this become a thing? Birmingham, Alabama is a city with a lot of history, from the 1916 Irondale earthquake to the wartime steel boom to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. It also has many problems. These problems come from its history, how its economy works, and the decisions made by its leaders. Today we are looking at the 10 reasons Birmingham, Alabama is one of the worst cities in the United States. Let's take a look. Number 10, segregation and civil rights struggles. If you want to know the ugly facts about Jim Crow and segregation, do some reading on Birmingham, Alabama. Imagine living in a city where every move is dictated by the color of your skin, where segregation wasn't just a policy, but a deeply ingrained way of life. The division between white and black communities was evident everywhere, from parks and pools to jobs. While white folks could move freely, enjoying everything the city had to offer, black individuals were pushed into manual labor jobs, struggling day in and day out to make ends meet. In the 1950s and 60s in Birmingham were especially tough. It was a time when the city earned the dubious title of being the most segregated city in the United States. Jim Crow laws were the order of the day, segregating black and white people in almost every aspect of public life. African Americans faced barriers at lunch counters and elevators and drinking fountains, and even when they went shopping. Efforts to cross these racial lines were met with hostility and violence, including homes in the black neighborhoods being bombed. Actually put dynamite under people's houses. The scars of segregation in Birmingham, Alabama are still visible, and this plays a big part in where the city is today. At the 2020 census, Birmingham, Alabama was the 8th most segregated major city in the U.S. Number 9, the deindustrialization of Birmingham. Birmingham and steel go way back, like peanut butter and jelly. From the early days, the steel industry was a big player in this town, shaping the local economy in ways big and small. It was the heart of Birmingham, pumping life into the city with every ton of steel produced. Fast forward to today, the steel industry is still there. It's just nothing like it used to be. Now, I've seen different numbers, but around 40% of the population of Birmingham at one point worked in the steel industry or in a industry that supported the steel industry. Now, that was all the way back in the 1950s, and it slowly dwindled and then took a big drop around the 1980s. Birmingham, much like its Rust Belt cousins, has had a bit of a rough go since the late 20th century. It's kind of heartbreaking, really, when you think about how this city used to be, all thanks to the booming steel industry and iron manufacturing. Those industries were the pride and joy of Birmingham. At one point in the 1960s, at its peak, the steel and manufacturing industries employed about 35% of Birmingham's population. As those faded away, so did the people. The 1960 was the last census that they actually gained population. And as you look at the other stats, you see right around 1960, that's when the poverty went up. That's when the crime went up. That's about the time schools started being underfunded. And that brings us to number 8. Number 8, suburban flight. The latter half of the 20th century saw significant movement of people and resources from Birmingham's urban core to the suburbs. The suburban flight reduced the city's tax base, impacting public services and infrastructure development. This is the typical thing that goes on any place that is in the Rust Belt or any place that's losing jobs. Alabama's not in the Rust Belt, but they've always shared the same fate as the Rust Belt because of manufacturing. It's basically a snowball effect. As they lost these jobs, they lost people. And as they lost people, they lost the tax base. As they lost tax base, everything starts getting cut. As things get cut, more people leave, making the problem even worse. One man said half the people in Birmingham have jobs that they don't want to leave, and the other half can't afford to leave. Like I'd said, the last census that Birmingham gained population was the 1960 census, when their population grew by 4.6%. Since then, they've lost 12%, 5%, 6%, 8%, 12%, 5%, and since 2020 alone, they've already lost 3%. At its peak, the city of Birmingham, not the metro area with all the suburbs, had 340,000 residents. Right now, they have about 192,000. Number 7, political challenges. Birmingham, like many cities, hasn't had the smoothest ride when it comes to politics. It's been a bit of a roller coaster with no seatbelts and a bum wheel. The city has had its fair share of governance issues, and yep, the not so glamorous side of politics, corruption. It depends on what poll you look at, but if you right now Google what are the most corrupt states, what are the most corrupt cities, I promise you, probably in the top 5, but at least the top 10, you'll see 3 states: Louisiana, Illinois, and Alabama. It's almost like those 3 states are in a competition to see who can get to the top. If you right now Google Birmingham, Alabama corruption, you won't be disappointed if you're into reading about corruption. I would explain them to you, but honestly, 2 years ago, my liability insurance dropped me because I did a video on corrupt mayors. They basically told me I was begging for a lawsuit, and they don't like to invest in lawsuits. So I had to get another one. It cost me like twice as much. All because of a video. So I'm not saying things. But definitely Google that. It's pretty interesting. But when you're talking about corruption, these snags in the system have really thrown a wrench into the works of Birmingham, making it tougher to get policies across the finish line that could genuinely help the city thrive. It's kind of like driving with the handbrake on. You're trying, but something's holding you back. Let's be honest, the political headaches do more than just slow down progress. They've been a bit of a blockade when it comes to mapping out and executing economic development strategies. It's like Birmingham has been sitting on a gold mine of potential, ready to break through and shine, but these challenges keep putting up roadblocks. It's frustrating if you're anyone that follows the city's politics, or you're someone that cares about the city. But another way it kind of highlights the resilience of the people that still live in Birmingham. They're not leaving. They want their city to be fixed, and a lot of them are actively looking for ways to navigate through the political maze. Now, politics, you might just think stay in politics, but no, like I said, it affects how things are done in the city. Infrastructure things get put on hold, or they're just bogged down. Another thing that most people don't realize is big corporations that are maybe looking for new headquarters, if you've got all kinds of stuff in the news about political corruption and this and that, those companies might think twice about moving their operation to your city. I'm not saying anyone's done that for Birmingham, but it might have happened. You'll never know. It's happened other places. Number 6, educational disparities. It has been quite the challenge, to say the least, dealing with the whole educational inequality situation in Birmingham. There's a noticeable rift when it comes to the resources available and the outcomes expected between the various communities. It's like some areas have the upper hand with better schools, books, and even extracurricular opportunities, while others are scrambling to make do with what they have. Some schools even have the old school chalkboards, remember those, with the actual chalk instead of a marker? This is another thing that's got a snowball effect. When people are going to schools that don't have all the resources, the outcomes aren't the greatest. Those differences in education are spilling over into the workforce, making it harder for some folks to find jobs or climb up the economic ladder. This is not exclusive to Birmingham. This happens all over the country. It happens all over the world, really. But it's a big deal in Birmingham. It's been going on a long time. They make little changes here or there, things get fixed, but it's never equal. The one thing you can't overlook is the bigger picture. This gap in education isn't just a hurdle for individuals. It's like a roadblock for the city's growth as a whole. When you've got a chunk of the population that's not getting the education they need, it means we're all missing out on potential talent and innovation. Goes back to what I said earlier about companies coming into a city. If they don't have the workforce, if they've got a whole bunch of corruption and they don't have infrastructure that needs to be there, they're not coming to your city. That means, the city could lose out on tens of thousands of jobs. Number 5, crime and safety concerns. Birmingham has been wrestling with a pretty tough issue that's been hard to shake for decades. It's the high crime rate, especially when it comes to violent crime. When it comes to property crime, it's really not that bad. I mean, it's 114% above the national average. That is bad, but compared to its violent crime rate, it's not terrible. And there's a reason for this. When you have a city or any place that just has a whole bunch of poverty, people don't really go breaking into houses to find stuff that's actually in worse shape than their own. Nothing like breaking into a car, finding out the dude has a BlackBerry and a cassette tape player in his car. That is the biggest complaint right now of people in Birmingham is the crime rate. It's out of control. If you read right now, just go to Birmingham, read anything going on in the news. It is depressing. There's a lot of horrible things going on in different parts of the country, in different cities. I don't know why people are so cruel in Birmingham, but it honestly seems like they're trying to excel on just hurting and damaging people. There's a couple cases right now that I won't even get into. It's horrible. Every year, 21 people per every 1,000 are victims of a violent crime. And it's not just Birmingham. They have some really nice suburbs, but they've got a lot of their violent crime is spilling over into the suburbs. I mean, no matter where you go, you're going to have some violent crime. But when it really starts picking up pace to match that of the actual city, things aren't going great. And it's not just about what's going on here and now. This city has been taking a beating in the image department for decades, and it's just getting worse. When anyone ever says Birmingham to me, I don't think about all the civil rights stuff. I don't think about the amazing city that it once was. First thing I think about is the crime rate and the things people are doing to each other. The good news, and this is my opinion, I think it's come to a head, and I think they're really going to do something about what's going on in Birmingham now. Number 4, the economic inequality. Now, this has drugged the city down for a very long time, just like a lot of the other things. The game board is tilted one direction in Birmingham, and it just makes the city worse. The city's got this gap between the haves and the have-nots, and it's hard to ignore. A big chunk of these folks are scraping by, living in poverty, and it's not just about not having enough cash for the latest smartphone or fancy dinner or best shoes. That's like one of those talking points that people throw out whenever you talk about people living in poverty. Mentioned if you're living in poverty, don't get the next smartphone. The economic divides in Birmingham are deep-rooted, tied back to the mix of historical and systematic issues that just keep piling up, making it tougher for communities to come together and thrive. It's like there's this invisible wall separating different parts of the city, and it's been there for ages. And despite various efforts to bridge these gaps, it feels like the city's still playing catch-up. It's a complex puzzle where fixing one part often reveals new challenges. But it's crucial to the city's future if everyone gets a fair shot at success, no matter where they start. That's the American dream. Doesn't matter where you start, can you get to the next level up? It's almost like a video game. But in this version of Donkey Kong, you got Mario and Luigi throwing barrels at you. Number 3, infrastructure and urban decay. Parts of Birmingham have suffered from urban decay with neglected infrastructure and abandoned properties for decades. There are neighborhoods in Birmingham that look like they should be in Syria. And they're just about as dangerous. We've kind of touched on this one already, how as the people move out, there's less of a tax base, which means projects get put on hold or not even happen. Next thing you know, you got a 6-foot wide pothole that keeps collecting cars every week. Number 2, environmental horror story. Remember earlier we talked about how the steel and manufacturing industries built this city? Well, that gravy train ticket wasn't free. Birmingham has a rich industrial history. While contributing to its growth, it's also left a less welcome legacy of environmental challenges. The pollution from decades of industrial activity is more than just an eyesore. You know, back in the day, the government and industries weren't really too concerned with, the environment, the air we breathe, the water we drink. It was really not something they were concerned about. So they were just dumping stuff in rivers, lakes, pumping all kinds of stuff into the air. Didn't even worry about it. As long as they were turning a buck, that's all they cared about. Looking towards the future, in their opinion, is for suckers. The gritty past of Birmingham makes the air a little heavier to breathe and the water a bit more cautious to drink, affecting the well-being of the community and making it a bit tougher for everyone living there. Just from reading all the things that I've done over the last week researching this video, I'd never drink anything but bottled water if I was in Birmingham. This is a city that's in serious need of a detailing, a deep clean of the environment, the soil, and the water around Birmingham. And that's hard to do when you really don't have a good tax base. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have 2 channels you should check out. One on this day where we talk about things that happen every single day. And then, of course, our new one, which is World According to Briggs in Spanish. Briggs Espanol. There are links for that down in the description area. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, lack of hope. When you're so far down, it's hard to get back up. That's Birmingham's situation. They'd like to fix it, but the light at the end of the tunnel is miles away. And it almost gets to the point where a lot of people, part of the reason they're moving, they don't feel there's hope for Birmingham. Like if they started fixing everything right now, they're not going to see results for 10, 20 years down the line. Detroit's one of the cities that's starting to show a little bit of a rebirth, but they've been trying since the 1980s. Birmingham is overwhelmed with its problems right now. You hope for the best, but you know this isn't going to be a great city in most of our lifetimes. If it is, terrific. I hope it ends up that way. I hope it's better next year. I hope it's better next week. But we all know it's not going to happen. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great day. Be nice to each other.